I had the opportunity to come out and talk with Pastor Karl Keller on July 17th, 2001. And he shared about his ministry and a little bit about his history. And I hope this recording is a blessing to everyone. So thank you for agreeing to chat with me today. I know that it's been hard during COVID. The congregation has been worshiping from home and people haven't been able to see each other. And I know we've been praying for you, and I just think it will be nice for people to hear from you, even though it's through video. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I certainly do miss the congregation and the people in this kind of a situation. And yet it cannot be changed right now, but I know the Lord is still in control, and that's the good part of it all.
Yes, that is so true. I was thinking maybe we could start with just a little bit about you, maybe some history, where you grew up, why you decided to become a pastor, anything you want to share about that.
Well, I grew up in Saskatchewan on the farm, and why I became a pastor, it was not my plan to become a pastor, but what I did not know, it was my father's desire that someone from our family would be going into church work. And so also his sister, which was my sponsor at my baptism, with those two praying, I didn't have a chance. And so I told my dad when I went off to Concordia College, I said, you can't sell the farm because I'm coming back to farm. And I wanted that door to be open, and he agreed to that, even though I knew it was a challenge for him at his age. And he did have some difficulty, but he did not sell the farm, even though he had some difficulties with it, because of our agreement which we had made. And he hung into that for 9 years. It took me 9 years to go through for the ministry. I needed an extra year simply because when I went through high school, I didn't take any languages. And of course, you needed those when I got to Concordia. So I had to take 4 years of German, 4 years of Latin in 1 year, and try to catch up in order to meet the requirements to go in for ministry.
Wow. And so where was your first call?
My first call was to Pincher Creek in Alberta. And it was right in the mountains, or right next to the mountains. It was a beautiful place. I also had another congregation in Cardston, the only Mormon temple in Canada, and it was a high Mormon community. But I had those two places about an hour apart from each other, and so I had a dual parish for my first congregation. Yes.
And so when did you come out to the coast? What brought you out here?
What finally brought me out to here, I went from Pincher Creek to Edmonton, and I pastored there for 4 years. I was involved there a great deal in evangelism and equipping the lay people to share their faith, and then to bring people into the church. And our church was growing so well. And Campus Crusade for Christ came along with a special also training workshops and seminars, which were just kind of up my alley at the time. And then as I was beginning to gather churches together, or pastors from different churches, bring them to my church in Edmonton, and letting the lay people take the pastors out, showing them how to share their faith. And that was an experience that many pastors had never had. And that was always my dream and my hope, that I would be able to do that. And it was at that time then when I went to a lay institute for evangelism with Campus Crusade for Christ. And they asked me, can you, instead of just working at one congregation, can you consider working in a number of congregations? And can you join us and be part of how we can get churches so much more involved in evangelism all across Canada. And of course, I had just been teaching a seminar on how we have to, the church needs to multiply. If the world is growing as fast as it is and we're only adding, we're going to lose. And so they said, could you come and join us to help us to multiply? And so I thought I'd have to eat my own words if I didn't say yes. And so I did join them, and it was an opportunity to even learn much more about evangelism and how to share my faith much more and easily. And something that I just enjoyed so much, and something that I graduated from the seminary not knowing how to do. And it was something that was in my heart always. I need to know how to go into a home and share Jesus with them somehow. And I didn't know how to do that. But now I did. And that was what excited me mostly, I guess, about being involved in the church and in the various church bodies. And then, of course, I was traveling all across Canada doing this kind of ministry.
Right. And so how long after that did Walnut Grove congregation start?
Well, then I of course, came to the Vancouver area and got involved with my church here in Abbotsford. And then I just was asked about coming back into ministry. And I prayed about that and decided that if I was going to, there was an opportunity to start a new church, but I didn't, it wasn't really the district's plan. It was more my plan that if I could start a new church, I knew that we needed something in the area of contemporary worship. And that was something that we weren't too familiar with in the Lutheran Church. At least I wasn't anyway. And I said, I'm going to start a church with contemporary worship for many people who were kind of stepping out of the church, particularly young people, and going into that kind of ministry. And could we have that kind of a church in the community or in the area, where if people wanted to explore that in a Lutheran background and a Lutheran setting, they would be able to do that. And so that's why I decided to start one in the contemporary worship.
And so around what year was that?
Oh my goodness, I guess Walnut Grove now is going, what, about 30 years?
Yeah.
And so it'd be a little over 30 that I had started that, and saw many people, of course, coming to Christ, and the church growing to the point where finally I had to ask Pastor James to come and join us, because I wasn't able to handle it all by myself. And my purpose was that we grow. The key is, how can we get more people to come to faith in Jesus Christ, and then to be excited about their faith and be able to invite their friends to come?
So I know that you've shared the gospel in many different settings. Can you tell us about a memorable experience you have? Maybe how you start that conversation with people?
Well, I guess I was asked by a Campus Crusade for Christ, after I had gone back into full-time ministry, also about joining them in Russia. And that had always been a thing that I just felt, how would it be possible to go to a communist country and share the gospel? And that door opened in 1991. And they asked if I would join them in going there. And of course, I was excited that I would have an opportunity to go into a communist country and tell people about Jesus. And so I went, and we had an experience of a lifetime in a situation that I just didn't dream would even be possible, because those doors were closed so tight. And when we got there, to find people of course we needed interpreters, and the students at the university, when they could find somebody who would speak English, they were taking English in school, they would join us. In fact, when we had people who would be interpreters for us, others would come and join along and ask, do you mind if I just join your group just to hear you speak? Because they were wanting to learn so much more about English, because they felt if they could get some English behind them, they could maybe go anywhere in the world. And of course, while they were in Russia or Ukraine, we were in both those countries, being so strongly closed, there was no way they would be able to get out of that country unless they would have some English. And they felt that that was an answer to them, because it was so tight for them and so regulated that they didn't really know much else. But when they would speak with us, that was a dream, to live like we were living. That was just impossible in their mind. And so they were, at that time then, very open to anything that we would tell them. And of course, we tell them about Jesus, which was new to them, especially the younger people. Some of the older people still had some background, and in places they would have to hide their Bibles, because if the communist officials ever came to their home and found a Bible, they were in trouble. And I remember this one family, they had hid their Bible so well that they had forgotten where they had put it, and they couldn't find it when they wanted it back again. But to hear experiences like that when I come from Canada, where we had such an openness to the gospel, and in some cases, maybe even negativism, why even bother with this? To them, it was like a new, fresh desire of hope. And to even meet someone that they could just, all they wanted to do is walk along while I had another translator, so that they could listen to us, that they could even possibly meet someone that would be speaking like this, was a dream to them that I guess there's maybe a door that could open for me sometime too.
Yeah. It's amazing how God uses things we don't expect to open those doors sometimes.
I never expected that. And I never had any fear when I was in that country, because I was told they can just take you and lock you up. And I said, well, fine, if they lock me up, I guess Paul, when he was locked up, he just shared the gospel where he was locked up. So it doesn't matter where I'm at. If that's where I have to be, well, that's where I'm going to have to be.
I don't know if everybody would be as bold as you in that situation.
I don't know if that was just boldness, or it was just knowing that I knew I had Jesus Christ on my side. And if I had him on my side, I had nothing to fear. And it seemed as though that's the way Paul and Peter had to operate too. Knowing that they had Jesus on their side, they had nothing to lose. And I felt I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And it was like a child in a candy shop. It was like me learning new things that I had never seen before, heard some things about, but never really had experienced. And now I'm right in the midst of it. And so I was in the candy shop.
So missions have been an important part of your life for a long time.
That came from my home. My father had such a heart always for the lost, and he grew up. He only had grade 4. He didn't have much education, but what he had, he used it to the best of his ability. And I always, as kids, we would laugh at how he would say things and describe things, because he just didn't have the schooling that, of course, we had and that we were privileged for. And as far as my father was concerned, he knew that was so valuable because he didn't have it. And there was nothing that could ever keep us kids at home. We had to go to school. Except in harvest time, we were needed at home to help with the harvest. If it was nothing else, I had to shovel in the bin all the time as the grains would come in, and to keep it so that they could keep on harvesting. And that was a priority. So I could always stay home at harvest time. And I thought that was just so great. that I could do that. And then when I got old enough that I could drive a team of horses and load a load of sheaves and then bring them into the threshing machine and unload them myself and be part of that. And when I was about 14, I was able to be strong enough to do that. And then I would skip school for probably 3 weeks to a month, and we would be harvesting. And then I'd go back to school, try and catch up with the rest of the kids that had been in the same class or same grade as I was.
And farming is still a big part of your life, too. We're sitting here on your farm today.
Yes, we're sitting here on the farm today, and it was always my dream to also be involved in a farm some way. And and because my daughter wanted a horse, in order to get her out of my hair, I said she should pray about it. And I thought that'll end it. It'll never go any further than that. But God answers prayer. And so one day she came to me and said, Dad, I got enough money for a horse. I said, you got enough money for a horse? Where'd you get that? Well, I babysat and I saved it and I got enough. And she did. And I said, well, where are you going to keep it? Well, she said, under the deck, Dad. This was in town, obviously a city kid. And I said, it needs a place to run, to eat. And she said, oh, okay. And at that time, I was asked to be the director of the Lutheran Evangelistic Movement. And so from Campus Crusade for Christ, I became the director of the evangelistic movement in Lutheranism. And also at the same time was on associate staff with Campus Crusade for Christ. So I would be gone for 2-3 weeks at a time. And she would just gather together the newspapers for those 3 weeks from Abbotsford. And when I came back, she would always show me the land for sale. And then she would watch my face and she said, too much, Dad? And I said, oh, yes. Well, go bargain them down, she said. She knew I bargained, I guess, for everything that I did. And so I said, oh, too much to bargain. And one day she found this property. And I said, I think that's a mistake. Well, go check, Dad. So I checked and it wasn't a mistake. So I bargained him down from his mistake. And I paid $75,000 for this property. At that time, nothing on it but for the horse to eat.
Yep.
And so that was how she got her horse. And then, of course, I sold my home in Abbotsford and built the home here and was able to see now a piece of property that's probably worth about $2 million.
Wow.
And my goal is, and my children know this as well, that when this is sold, it'll go to Africa, because there, the church is just not growing. It's kind of exploding at times. And here in Canada, our churches are declining. It's a challenge, or maybe it's just that we don't know how. But there, to give you an example, when I went to Africa first in 2001, there were 2.7 million Lutherans in Tanzania. 10 years later, there's 5 million. And when I was there a few years ago, because I went to Kenya to dedicate a church in memory of my wife, there's 6 million.
Wow.
And they are still constantly growing. And then, of course, they asked me to do the chapel for the new Lutheran University they're building at the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. And that is almost completed now. And so I'll obviously be going back for the dedication of that, if that's possible. That may not happen because of the variant, because of COVID, and otherwise I'd have been back there already. So that might not happen, and that's all right if it doesn't. But it's an opportunity, again, to see God at work in such an amazing way in that country, and the church so alive and growing phenomenally. I would imagine now they got added another 1 million, and that's not quite how we see ourselves growing here.
Yeah.
So
We're going to pause here for today, and we hope you'll join us again next week when we finish the conversation.